everyone, it's been recently announced that the final archetype of the Dark Saviours booster set will be the Brandish Maidens. We have the Skyfang brigade, which is themed around pirate animals, new vampire support, and now this. The Brandish Maidens. I'm loving the futuristic mech theme of this archetype. If this set is like Destiny Soldiers, Fusion Enforcers, or Spirit Warriors, then consider this my favourite. I want to build every deck in this set. Let's actually go over some of the new Brandish Maidens, which so far seems to be the only archetype in this set with links. We have 3 monsters and a lot of spells, so let's be quick here. We have Brandish Maiden Ray, a Dark Warrior effect monster with 1500 attack and defense, a level 4 monster. You can only use this card name's first and second effects once per turn each. First effect, quick effects. You contribute this card, special summon 1 Brandish Maiden monster from your extra deck to your extra monster zone. Interesting, so far we don't understand the whole purpose of it yet. For the second effect, while this card is in your graveyard, if a face-up Brandish Maiden Link monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect or is destroyed by battle, you can special summon this card. Alright, so far so good. It's a great way to recycle between the actual monsters itself. Moving on, we have Brandish Maiden Shizuku, a Water Machine Link effect monster. It's a Link 1 1500 and it points to the top right. 1 Brandish Maiden monster except a water monster, but that's irrelevant given that Ray can actually special summon it with her own effect. You can only special summon this Link monster once per turn, unfortunately. It has 2 effects. The first effect is monsters your opponent controls loses 100 attack and defense for each spell card in your graveyard. That actually makes sense considering we have so many spells, so that could actually pile on a lot. Its second effect is once per during the end phase. If this card was special summoned during this turn, you can add 1 Brandish spell card from your deck to your hand that does not share the same name with a card in your graveyard. There we go. So it's a little balanced because you obviously can't have the same name as something in your graveyard, but you still get to add something. Alright, and next we have Brandish Maiden Kagari, a Fire Machine Link effect monster. It's a Link 1 1500 attack and it's pointing to the top left. 1 Brandish Maiden monster except a Fire monster, but again irrelevant as long as you have Ray. You can only special summon this once per turn, which is fine. The first effect is, if this card is special summoned, you can target 1 Brandish spell card in your graveyard, add it to your hand. Its second effect is, this card gains 100 attack for each spell card in your graveyard. So again, just slightly different from Shizuku, but both Link monsters can actually work as boss monsters on their own. As long as you have Ray, it really just starts off the whole deck. Alright, so now let's move on to the spell cards. Brandish Skill Afterburner. It's a normal spell card, and its effect is, if there are no monsters in your main monster zone, target 1 face-up monster on the field, destroy it. Then, if there are 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard, destroy 1 spell trap on the field. Not too bad of a card. It does require you to actually target, but you can essentially destroy 2 cards on the field as long as you have 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard. The second card is Brandish Startup Engage. A normal spell card. If there is no monster in your main monster zone, add 1 Brandish card from your deck to your hand, except Brandish Startup Engage. And then if there are 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard, you can draw 1 card. So essentially all the spell cards actually have that same condition where you can activate these spell cards if you have no monsters in your main monster zone, and then they get the additional effect if you have 3 or more spell cards in the graveyard. So I won't be going over that anymore, I'll just go over the actual main effect. Moving on, we have Brandish Mecha Shark Cannon. It's a quick play spell this time, and for the first effect, you can target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. And then for the second effect, if you have the 3 spells in your graveyard, you can special summon it to your field instead of banishing it, but it cannot attack. Next we have Brandish Mecha Widow Anchor. It's a quick play spell card, and its effect is target 1 effect monster on the field, negate that monster's effect. If you meet the second condition, then you can take control of that monster until the end phase. Alright, so moving on, we have Brandish Mecha Hornet Bit. So that's actually really good considering we have that many quick play spells. For the first effect, you can special summon a Brandish Maiden token Warrior Dark level 1, 0 attack and defense, and it cannot be tributed. If you meet the second condition, then that token's attack and defense becomes 1500. Maybe they'll come into play a lot later on. Next we have Brandish Skill Jamming Wave, a normal spell card. If you meet the first condition, target a set spell card on the field and destroy it, spell or trap. And if you meet the second condition, destroy one monster on the field. This is actually very similar to the first card Afterburner, essentially the same effects but done so in a different way. Alright, so here's where things get interesting. We have the field spell and we also have a continuous spell. For the field spell we have two effects. You can only use the effects once per turn each. You can target one other card you control, excavate the top 3 cards of your deck, and then add one excavated brandish card to your hand. Shuffle the other cards to the deck. If a brandish card was excavated, send that target to the graveyard. That's actually really good considering you can send your spell cards to the graveyard, which will always meet the second condition of all your spell cards, which requires you to have 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard. The second effect is if this card is sent from the field zone to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon one Brandish Maiden monster from your deck. So instantly we have good recovery, just instantly bringing back Ray. Then we have the continuous spell card, Brandish Mechanism Multi-Roll. It has 2 effects. The first effect is once per turn you can target one other card you control. Send that card to the graveyard. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to your spell card activations until the end of this turn. So that actually comes in handy because if we remember from before, there was one of the spell cards that allowed us to take our opponent's monsters, and there was also a spell card that allowed us to special summon a token. It's good that those cards can actually be used as fodder for this particular continuous spell card here. For the second effect, once per turn during the end phase, you can set a number of Brandish spell cards with different names from your graveyard to your field up to the number of Brandish spell cards you activated during this turn while this card was face up, but banish them if they leave the field. So that's actually a great way to recover a lot of your spells that you activated in one turn. However, there is one problem. As soon as they leave the field, they get banished, so you lose the secondary effect of most of the spell cards, which is if you have 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard. For the final spell card, it's a quick play spell, Brandish Mecha Eagle Booster. Its effect is, if it meets the first condition, target one face-up monster on the field. Until the end of this turn, it is unaffected by card effects, except its own. And also, if you meet this second condition, then it cannot be destroyed by battle until the end of this turn, which is an okay card. So essentially what I'm getting from this particular deck is that it focuses on having 2 conditions met for the spell cards to be able to be activated. It's to have no monsters in your main monster zone, which makes sense. Whenever you have Ray, you'll always go into the extra link monsters. Those link monsters essentially have their own effects that allow them to act as the boss monster to beat down your opponent, while your spell cards actually act as extensions to help you win the game. Now, given that this deck is so reliant on spell cards, there's a total of 9 spell cards, which means if you're playing 3 copies of every single card, you're playing 27 cards, which is a lot of spells. Hey everyone, so I made this video a few hours before this card was released, so I'm going to be talking about the final card right now. So we have Hercules Base. It's an equip spell card, which is, I think it's the first equip spell. It's also the 10th spell card as well, so its effect is activate only if you control no monsters, which is obviously the first condition we went over. The equipped monster cannot attack directly, but it can make 2 attacks on monsters during each battle phase. The second effect is if the equipped monster destroys a monster by battle, and you meet this second condition, which is the 3 or more spell cards in the graveyard, you can draw 1 card. So essentially that allows you to draw 2 cards if you destroy 2 monsters by battle. And the third effect is if this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can target up to 3 Brandish spell cards in your graveyard, accept itself, and shuffle them into the deck, so it's a great way to recycle. This deck is unfortunate because it has so many weaknesses. Firstly, its weakness is Royal Oppression because that pretty much negates all spells. Another problem is you also have Anti-Spell Fragrance, which requires you to set the spells first before you activate it. But of course that's not as big of a deal as long as you play other cards to extend this deck. But being so reliant on spell cards does become a big problem. And another card is actually Hey Trunade. Using Anti-Spell Fragrance together with Hey Trunade as a side deck tech against this particular deck is a really good option. So if you want to beat this deck, just use Hate Runade as well as Anti-Spell Fragrance. Both cards at 3, and you can even throw in the Royal Oppression if you want to. Overall, I do like this theme of the deck, and I will definitely be building one myself, but being that this deck is so reliant on spell cards, it is hard to say that I'll even bring this deck to a local tournament or something like that. But definitely tell me what you guys actually think of this archetype. Do you guys like it? Do you want to play it yourself? Hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time.